Today is January 31st, 2017. This is your Lake of the Ozarks fishing report for the Upper Osage area of Lake of the Ozarks, and this report is courtesy of Joe's Lake Ozark Guide Service. We've had a month since I did my last report. I get tied up with some wintertime obligations, coaching basketball, so that kind of keeps me busy, but winding down to the end of that season and had a few days off here, and the weather cooperated perfectly for me. Was able to come up and get on the water and give everybody a fishing report. Before I get started, I'm not sponsored by anybody, but I'm going to mention a couple places here that are really helpful to all the anglers getting information on Lake of the Ozarks. And one is Bassing Bob. If you're not a member or subscriber to Bassing Bob, and you're going to fish Lake of the Ozarks regularly, I strongly suggest you do that. It is well worth your money. There's information, there's tips, fishing reports from people all over the lake area, and then there's also a monthly experts meeting, and then my videos end up on Bassing Bob, and so do other people who have information that they like to share with a lot of anglers. Also tournament results, just a wealth of information that you can get. And bassingbob.com, get on there. I think you can do a 2-day free trial to see if you like it or not. They not only have a bass section of the Bassing Bob website, but also there's a crappie section is there as well too. And some of the best crappie experts on the lake share all their tips about how they're catching crappie here on the Lake of the Ozarks. I also want to mention Wayne at Fitz Fishing. You know, Wayne has probably spent more time, more years on this lake than anybody else, and Wayne is so generous and so giving in what he does. His shop is down there at Osage Beach. It's called Fitz Fishing, F-I-T-Z Fishing. Stop in, ask him what they're biting on. He'll show you what they're biting on. He doesn't hide any secrets, and he'll also, if you want an Alabama rig, he'll gladly rig one up for you, show you this is what works, this is what doesn't work. So Wayne's a great guy. And then you'll notice with a lot of the baits that I'll show you I use is the Crocagator Bait Company. Probably Crocagator baits are probably used on this lake more than probably any other bait. And they have a whole line of baits, and they're also coming out with new baits. So Jim and Denise Dill at Crocagator Bait Company do a fantastic job of sharing information with the fishermen and also helping some of us other guides in the area. So just want to give a shout out to those people. I'm sure there's other people I'm missing, but those are the main three that really just do a wonderful job here on the lake. Okay, fishing report. Lake of the Ozarks, Upper Osage. The water temperature is hanging around 40. I think we're past the point where we're going to get ice, so I don't think it's going to ice over this year. I think we had some light glaze of ice in back of some creeks earlier. Water temperature has come back up a little bit, so that's good. Like I said, I don't think we'll get any ice over this winter like we've had in the past. The water color, if you go back into the creeks, the water's actually really clear. It's clearest that I've seen in a number of years before the floods we had last year. And you get out on the main lake, it's a little murky, but I'm talking you can get back in the creeks and get 1.5 to 2.5 feet of visibility, which is pretty rare for the Upper Osage part. Now you get down around Hurricane Deck part of the Osage, it's going to be a little clearer than that. You get farther up the lake, up towards Buffalo Creek, 70-mile marker, it's going to get a little dirtier. But and one of the things that makes if you get some windy days, that's just going to churn up some of the mud flats up there and make it a little dirtier. But overall, the water in the Upper Osage is actually really, really clear. So here's what I've done the last 2 days. They're dropping the lake. The lake is 3 feet down. It's going to come down 2 more feet or more. Let's hope not. Let's hope it just gets to 2 more feet and they stop it. So what is going on right now is as they're dropping the lake, they're pulling the fish off these flats and out of the back of the creeks, and they're gravitating towards the channel banks. That's what they're doing. So there's 2 main patterns you can fish in the creeks right now. You can fish the creek channel banks, and you can fish in the coves and the creeks. Any of those secondary points is if you've got wind. And the key on the secondary points is it really helps to have wind on those. And I'll show you a couple of baits that I've been using on the secondary points and on the channel banks. Then I'll show you a pretty nice fish I caught this morning and just tell you a little bit about that technique, what I use to get it. So let's talk about the channel banks first. Channel banks for me, the water temperature's in the low 40s like it is right now. It's a jig bite for me. You can use a smaller finesse jig, and when we're talking finesse jigs, we're just talking about any jig that's just a smaller compact bait. It doesn't really have to say finesse jig on the package when you buy it. You could buy, if you're using a 1/2 ounce jig by a certain company and they sell a 1/4 ounce jig, you can use that 1/4 ounce jig, just shorten up your jig trailer a little bit and make it a smaller compact bait, and that's more of what we're talking about, a finesse jig, a finesse technique. So that's one of the lures you can use. This is a crocodigator. This is a Ozark craw color. It's a very good color, green, black, and brown in it, which is natural color for crawfish. It's good for clear water. It's also good for dirty water, because in dirty water you want a jig that's more of a dark color. It gives a silhouette, and that's what this jig will also give. When the water gets down around 40 degrees, I'll throw actually this lure. It's called a swamp bug. It's kind of a grub, I guess you would call it, and it has little tentacles off the side, kind of like a crawfish legs, but then it has like a shad-like tail, so it's kind of a combo bait. But I'll throw this on the same areas that I'm throwing the jig, but I'll fish this a lot slower. This bait's more designed to fish in really colder water. And when you fish this bait, you just want to drag it. You don't necessarily want to hop it. You can, when the bite picks up and gets a little more aggressive, you can pump or hop the bait and let the tail kind of flutter down as the bait falls. But right now, with the water as cold as it is, you just want to mainly drag that bait. And how I tell people to use it is just kind of pull the slack out of your line to the point where you're not even feeling the bait. By pulling the slack, you're gonna move that bait along. That's what you're gonna do. It's just gonna edge along as you pull it. And then when you do get to a rock or something, you can kind of shake your rod tip, and that bait will shake, and then you can just pop it over that rock. So those are two really good baits you can use on these channel banks. If the fish are suspended on these channel banks, then you can go to the jerk baits. Okay, I'm gonna talk about them when we get to the secondary points. So that's mainly, in the wintertime, you want to keep things a little bit more simple. And the biggest thing here in the wintertime is you got to fish slow. And if you think you're fishing slow, try to slow down even more. That's my tip to you. You can't fish slow enough. Even though it might be 55 degrees today, that water's still cold because it got down to 30s overnight. So the warming part of the day isn't going to be that long. What's going to warm up this water temperature is warmer nights and some warmer rains that come in. So that water's still cold, so you need to fish slower and slower. So we'll fish these jigs and these bottom bouncing baits when the shad are on the bottom, or if it's just a calm, slick day. If you get some of the warm days like we get in the spring, quite often you get a lot of wind, it might be hard to fish the jig or the shaky head. That's where you can go to the jerk baits. The last 2 days, I did not have much success on the channel banks. I think back in the creeks, the water has cleared up, so it's kind of pulled those fish off the bank a little bit, and I think they've suspended a little bit. But the wind came up, so what I started doing was targeting secondary points, and that's when I started catching some pretty nice fish on the jerk bait. I throw basically two types or two styles in the Upper Osage. One is a Smithwick Rogue. That's a standard bait on Lake of the Ozarks. I believe the Rogue is pretty good in dirty water because it's a fatter bait with a larger bill, fatter bait than maybe the mega bass on the right, and the Rogue will kind of displace or move more water. So I think that's a pretty good bait in stained water, although I think the mega bass is probably the best jerk bait on the market. It really is. I throw this bait here, it's a clown color with a red nose. I throw that when it's sunny, so we get that flash off the side. Chrome with a blue back, chrome with a black back will work. And then when we get some cloud cover, that clown will still work, but I just go to a straight bone white when we get some stained water and cloud cover. Okay, same thing with the mega bass. That's a pretty good bait in when the sun's kind of going in and out of the clouds. It's not a bluebird day, but it's not a cloudy day either. So Pro Blue of the mega bass colors, the Pro Blue 2 is an excellent color for a sunny day in clearer water. And the key to that bait, what I was doing yesterday was when the wind came up, I went and fished those points where the wind was hitting directly on it. Now, if I had a bank, like if my hand was the bank and the wind was blowing parallel to the bank, I didn't seem to get bit very well on those banks. Where I got bit was where you had a point or that section of the bank and the wind was coming straight in at a 90-degree angle on that bank, or kind of more at an angle like a 45-degree angle. But anytime the wind was blowing parallel to that bank, just had a hard time getting bit. Let me show you one I caught this morning. This is one I caught this morning. Get your tail down there so you look bigger. Anyway, this is one I caught this morning on a jerk bait. It was on a Mega Bass Pro Blue. This thing's, it's 6, it's right at 6 plus, and You know how us fishermen are. You know, when fish grow the fastest is always between 8 o'clock Sunday night and before you get back to work, 8 o'clock Monday morning. But this was a nice fish. And, you know, to be such a big fish like that, it didn't really just destroy the bait. I was jerking the bait and letting it sit 5 or 6 seconds at a time, and then just kind of twist it, and it just felt something just dead on it. You know, just felt like dead weight on there. And then the fish kind of realized it, and they don't fight that hard in this cold water. But that's a real nice fish. And then I caught 2 or 3 other keepers on that same bank. But here's the thing about fishing those points. This point was a rounded point, and there's always that one specific strategic spot on any point where those fish are going to hold. And that's what you want to key on. It's not necessarily that the point was there. It's that where did you catch that fish on that point? Where was your boat positioned? Where did you point at? What angle were you at? What rock did you throw it at towards the bank? That's the key. And when you catch a big fish like that, you want to try to duplicate that every time, because these points are big, a lot of water around them. But if you can pinpoint that specific area where those fish will hold with that wind blowing in on them, you can kind of load the boat. So, you know, the Alabama rig is another bait you can throw up here. I've got one on the boat. I'm not going to show it to you. You can. I don't like it. It's a lot of work to throw. It does catch a lot of fish though, and it does catch some big fish. But in the Alabama rig, you basically throw it out there, let it sink 4 or 5 feet, twitch it, and just reel it back in. There's not a lot of skill. There's not a lot of technique to it. But there is some controversy with it. Some tournaments allow it. A lot of tournaments don't allow it. They don't feel like it takes much skill to catch a big fish on that, and they're expensive. You know, the rig itself. So try to do another report here in a couple of weeks before we get to the 1st of March. Can't guarantee that. It's going to depend on the weather and schedules. Once I get into March, I'll be doing some reports probably every 2 weeks for you guys that have tournaments coming up to the lake. So good luck in your fishing. Be safe. If you get on the water, wear your life jacket. Try not to fish by yourself. Try to fish with a partner. And good luck and thank you.